1980s, a teenage boy named Daniel LaPlante became notorious for his bizarre and terrifying behavior. Living in Massachusetts, Daniel was known for his troubled past and his fascination with the macabre. His story took a dark turn when he began to stalk the Andrews family, who lived in a home he believed was abandoned. Daniel, taking advantage of their absence, broke into their house and began to wreak havoc. He even hid in their home, leaving haunting messages and disturbing items for them to discover upon their return. The family's sense of security quickly vanished, replaced by fear and paranoia. LaPlante's obsession escalated when he began to impersonate a ghost, using eerie sounds and messages to further terrorize his victims. However, things escalated even more when LaPlante committed a heinous crime, leading to the tragic murder of a woman. The case captured media attention, revealing the psychology behind his actions and the chilling reality of his invasion. LaPlante's story serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary lives, forever altering the fabric of a community.
Have you ever heard of Daniel LaPlante? And I am going to warn you, this is going to be 2 parts, so if you don't like part 2s, keep scrolling. Daniel was born on May 15th of 1970 in Townsend, Massachusetts. He did not have an easy life. His home life was very abusive, as well as any other encounters he had with adults. He didn't seem to have very much luck. Even during school, he was described as a loner and not particularly friendly, so he didn't have a lot of friends, so school couldn't even be an escape for him. Daniel would spend a lot of time in the woods by himself. And eventually he would start breaking into his neighbors' homes, but he wouldn't just steal things, he would move things around and just mess with his neighbors. It was more of a mind game for him than the actual robbery itself. When he was 15 years old, he met a girl named Tina Bowen, and he became pretty obsessed with her. Daniel did take Tina on a date over the Easter break, but after her friends found out about it, they kind of warned her about Daniel, saying that he was facing R-word charges. And so Tina decided to break it off immediately. So that's when Daniel turned to his mind games to mess with the Bowen family. Daniel broke into their home from the crawl space under the house. Tina had just recently lost her mother, and Tina and her sister would use a Ouija board to try to communicate with her. Daniel, who had broken into the house and had started living in the house, like in the walls, noticed them using this Ouija board and started to mess with the family. He would rearrange items in their home, drink their milk, pour out their alcohol. The family even found a family photo with a knife sticking through it at one point. He was just messing with them. At first, Tina's father thought that the girls were just messing with each other, but on December 8th of 1986, Tina came home and found Daniel in the house. He had hidden himself in a wardrobe and painted his face, and he was holding a hatchet. Daniel put the girls in a room before disappearing somewhere in the house. Tina was able to escape, and she was able to alert the police, who eventually came to the house and found Daniel in the crawl space. Daniel had been living in their house for weeks. Daniel was arrested and held in a juvenile facility, but his mother put up his bail, which was $10,000, after she refinanced her house. And it would only take 2 months for Daniel to commit a much more horrific crime. Part 2 is up. Or it will be when I'm done filming. So here's part 2 to Daniel LaPlante. So after being bailed out, it took him no time at all to continue his robbery spree. And on October 14th of 1987, he stole 2 .22 caliber firearms from his neighbor. And then on November 16th, he burglarized the home of the Gustafson family. The first time he merely burglarized the family, but the second time on December 1st of 1987, he came into the home with the firearms he had stolen from the other neighbor. Daniel said he hadn't expected Priscilla to be home, and at first he thought about jumping out the window, but then he decided to confront Priscilla. Daniel forced Priscilla into her son's room, where he tied her up. He also gagged her with one of his own socks. Daniel then went on to essay Priscilla and shot her twice. Daniel then took 5-year-old William into the bathroom where he drowned him. Daniel then tried to make his escape, but as he was leaving, he ran into Abigail, who was coming home from school. He lured Abigail into another bathroom where he drowned her as well. Then Daniel went home and attended his niece's birthday party like nothing had happened. Priscilla and her 2 children would be found later that evening by her husband. He's the one who alerted the police. Daniel left a literal trail of evidence from the Gustafson home to his own home. They found the wet shirt that he had worn while drowning the children, and the dogs led them to the LaPlante home. Daniel was taken in for questioning, but they didn't have enough to hold him. They planned on questioning him again the next day, but Daniel fled, and this led to a manhunt. Daniel went on to burglarize many more homes, but was eventually found in a dumpster on December 3rd of 1987. Daniel went to trial in October of 1988, where he was eventually found guilty. He was given 3 life sentences. More chilling, though, is that Daniel appealed for a reduced sentence in 2017, so pretty recently, but the judge found that he was unremorseful for what he had done and refused to give him this reduced sentence. Daniel will not be paroled for another 45 years, so what are your thoughts on this case? Do you think he deserves a reduced sentence because of his past? But let me know your thoughts in the comments and follow for more true crime.
Oh my! Hello, true crimers! This is the case of Daniel LaPlante. Viewer discretion is advised. Oh, Danny boy! He was born on May 16th, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts. As with many of these people I talk about, he was abused as a child by his stepfather, physically and sexually. In school, he would be referred to as the creepy kid. And he spent a good portion of his youth, well, breaking into people's homes. He would steal shit, but a lot of people thought he just did it for the thrill of breaking into a house. You know, normal stuff. In 1986, he would begin to terrify a family, the Andrews family. It's believed he broke into their house and somehow got their phone number. He then started to call the Andrews phone and asked for their 15-year-old daughter, Annie. He said he got the phone number from a friend at school, and he managed to convince her to go out on a date. When they went on their date, it turns out that little Danny here had, he lied about everything, including his appearance. And then Annie would stop talking to him. Well, one night, the Andrews girls began to hear tapping on their walls. This was after they tried doing a seance in their house, so they were like, oh my god, it's ghosts. They then noticed furniture moving and objects disappearing. The tapping became louder. They went down to the basement to follow the noise, and they saw a note written in blood on the wall that says, I'm in your room, come find me. Then one day, the Andrews' father, Brian, he looked down the hallway. He saw Daniel. His face was covered in makeup and he was wearing a blonde wig and a dress that belonged to the Andrews' deceased wife and mother. It turns out that Daniel was hiding in the walls, terrorizing the family. And he was arrested. He was put in juvenile detention where he eventually got out. On December 1st, 1987, he stumbled across the Gustafson family's home. The family was Father Andrew, Mother Priscilla, and their children William and Abigail. And Priscilla was pregnant with their 3rd child. Daniel randomly chose their home and broke into it. This was in the middle of the day and Andrew was at work. Priscilla was home with the 2 kids. When Andrew came home after 5 o'clock that night, he would discover the 3 dead bodies of his wife and 2 children. Priscilla was sexually assaulted, she had a pillow over her head, and she had been shot multiple times. William and Abigail had been drowned to death in 2 separate bathrooms. Daniel was known to break into homes in the area, and he was quickly arrested. He left a lot of evidence. He smiled his way through the trial. He got 3 life sentences, where he continues to rot in jail.
Imagine someone you dated living in your walls without you knowing and watching your every move, knowing when you shower, sleep, or eat dinner with your family. That person is Daniel LaPlante, and after he watched Tina Bowen and her sister try to contact their recently deceased mother on a Ouija board, he impersonated their mother's ghost, scratching messages like, "Marry me," or "I'm in your room, come find me," in blood on the walls. The scared daughters told their dad, who thought they were joking, until he walked into their room and saw Daniel standing in his wife's dress, wearing her makeup, a wig, and holding a hatchet. He ended up disappearing, but police found him in the basement. He lived near the walls for months and even carved peepholes so he could spy on the family. He was arrested, but got out on bail. 2 months later, he committed his worst crime, stealing the last breaths of his neighbors Priscilla Gustafson and her 2 kids after breaking into their home. He was found guilty of his crimes and given 3 life sentences. It's crazy too.
In the mid-1980s, Danny LaPlante, a troubled individual with a history of criminal behavior, embarked on a disturbing spree of thefts and psychological torment. Danny, who was born in Massachusetts in 1970, had a troubled childhood characterized by dyslexia, personal hygiene issues, and abusive family dynamics. He exhibited signs of sociopathy from an early age, engaging in criminal activities and unsettling behaviors that alarmed both teachers and peers. Despite attempts at psychiatric intervention, including a misdiagnosis of hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, Danny's behavior escalated.
I lived unnoticed in a family's walls and convinced them they had ghosts. I am Daniel LaPlante, a name that strikes fear into the hearts of those who know my tale. In '86, I became the Bowen family's uninvited guest in their Pepperell, Massachusetts home. A lurking presence that turned a family home into a living nightmare. I started off as an unseen terror. Secretly, I'd infiltrate their house, moving objects, leaving notes, causing a haunting panic. The thrill, the power, it was intoxicating. But I craved more, and it led me down a darker path. One dreadful evening, cloaked in the dead mother's clothes, face smeared with makeup, I emerged from the basement wielding a hatchet. The sight was straight from a horror show. My mind, the terrifying scriptwriter. Caught, I was sent to juvenile hall. Too lenient, they said, but they didn't know what was coming. A year later, I claimed 3 lives, Priscilla Gustafson and her 2 young children. A crime so heinous it landed me 3 life sentences. Now, behind bars, I've turned to Wicca, searching for peace or maybe just distraction from the monstrous past I created.
I'm Daniel LaPlante, a triple murderer. Back in 1987, I took the lives of a nursery school teacher and her 2 kids. Despite a massive manhunt, I managed to evade capture. The chilling part of the story is how I was eventually found hiding in the closet of a girl I had once dated. Picture this. One night she opened her door to find me standing there, adorned in her mother's clothes, my face smeared with makeup and a menacing machete in hand. I quickly subdued her and her family, tying them up. Fortunately for the youngest, she narrowly escaped my clutches. As if the horror wasn't enough, I managed to slip away once again. It took 2 weeks before I was tracked down. The family, thinking they had escaped the nightmare, returned home only to spot me in the window. The police were summoned, and the truth behind my elusive nature came to light. I had been living within the walls of my former girlfriend's house the entire time.
I lived unnoticed in a family's walls and convinced them they had ghosts. I am Daniel LaPlante, a name that strikes fear into the hearts of those who know my tale. In '86, I became the Bowen family's uninvited guest in their Pepperell, Massachusetts home. A lurking presence that turned a family home into a living nightmare. I started off as an unseen terror. Secretly, I'd infiltrate their house, moving objects, leaving notes, causing a haunting panic. The thrill, the power, it was intoxicating. But I craved more, and it led me down a darker path. One dreadful evening, cloaked in the dead mother's clothes, face smeared with makeup, I emerged from the basement wielding a hatchet. The sight was straight from a horror show. My mind, the terrifying scriptwriter. Caught, I was sent to juvenile hall. Too lenient, they said, but they didn't know what was coming. A year later, I claimed 3 lives, Priscilla Gustafson and her 2 young children. A crime so heinous it landed me 3 life sentences. Now, behind bars, I've turned to Wicca, searching for peace or maybe just distraction from the monstrous past I created.